All right, let's dive into HIVE Digital Technologies Ltd. They're making some serious moves in the blockchain and AI space.
Yeah, they're a fascinating company. Ticker symbol HIVE for anyone following along.
Definitely worth taking a closer look at. We actually got our hands on two really in-depth reports on HIVE.
And these reports use a value investing approach,
Get that?
inspired by Warren Buffett.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be using to help you figure out if HIVE stock is something you should consider for your own portfolio. So think of this as a deep dive into HIVE.
Yeah, like a crash course on whether it's a hidden gem or, well, something to avoid.
Right. So big picture, HIVE is kind of unique because they're not just focused on one major tech trend. They're playing in two.
Yeah, they're involved in Bitcoin mining.
Okay, Bitcoin, that's huge, obviously.
It is, and they're also a big player in high-performance computing for AI.
And that's the other big trend everyone's talking about, AI.
Exactly. So, two massive growth areas.
Okay, so let's start with the Bitcoin side. How does HIVE stand out in the, honestly, super crowded world of cryptocurrency mining? There are tons of companies doing this.
Well, their big differentiator is sustainability.
Okay, interesting. So how does that work?
They've been very strategic about where they put their data centers.
Okay,
The locations they've chosen have access to renewable energy, and it's low cost.
gotcha. So that's a big deal because crypto mining in general uses a ton of energy, right?
It does. It can be very energy intensive, but by using renewable sources, HIVE reduces their environmental impact.
So they're kind of like the green Bitcoin miners.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And it's smart because more and more investors really care about ESG factors these days.
ESG, environmental, social, and governance, right? So HIVE is appealing to that group of investors.
Exactly. And there's a financial benefit too. Their commitment to green energy significantly reduces their costs.
So it's good for the planet and good for business. How much of a cost advantage are we talking about here?
About 20% compared to what other mining companies are spending.
Wow, that's significant.
It is. And they've actually gotten high ratings from some of the leading ESG rating agencies.
That's huge. It really boosts their credibility, especially in a space, the crypto world, that's sometimes seen as a bit, well, a bit shady.
Yeah, for sure. It also kind of future-proofs their business model. If governments start cracking down on energy-intensive mining.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the Bitcoin mining side. Let's shift gears to their second business, high-performance computing for AI. What exactly does that involve?
So basically, imagine renting out really, really powerful computer chips.
Okay,
That's essentially what they're doing. They use their fleet of NVIDIA GPUs, specifically the H100s. Those are like top of the line.
yeah, those are the ones everyone was scrambling to get their hands on back in 24, right? Remember that whole supply crunch?
Yeah, exactly. Well, HIVE was smart. They secured a huge supply of those H100 chips before the crunch really hit.
Ah, so they were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and they had a head start in meeting that huge surge in demand for AI computing power. And they've also developed proprietary cooling systems for their data centers.
Oh, wow.
All of this means they can offer these cloud computing services, the ones that companies need for AI at really competitive prices.
Okay, so they're in two really hot industries.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, 8AD AI.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it in a way that's both sustainable and cost efficient. I'm liking what I'm hearing so far.
It's an interesting story for
Yeah, it is. But a company's only as good as the people running it, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the leadership at HIVE. What can you tell us about the management team?
Well, they've got a pretty impressive track record.
Okay, good to know.
The CEO, Aidan Killick, he's the one who really pushed for this dual focus on Bitcoin and AI.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a big strategic shift from just pure play mining, and it's really paid off in terms of profitability.
So he's got a good vision for the company.
He does. And another thing I like, he has a significant amount of his own money invested in HIVE stock.
Oh, I like that. Skin in the game, as they say.
Exactly. And then you have Frank Holmes. He's the executive chairman.
Okay, tell me about him.
He brings decades of experience in resource investing, which is super relevant because, well, Bitcoin mining is resource intensive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you've got Killick with the tech vision and Holmes with the financial expertise. It's a pretty powerful combo.
They seem to have all the bases covered.
Yeah.
Anything else stand out to you about their leadership style?
I'd say their commitment to transparency. They publish real-time data on their mining operations.
Oh, okay.
And their ESG reporting is really thorough. That's something investors care about. But a lot of crypto companies are pretty opaque about their operations.
It's like the Wild West out there.
Sometimes, but HIVE is doing things differently.
Good for them. All right, so we've covered the business model, the management team. Now let's get to the numbers. How's HIV's financial health looking?
Really solid. Their revenue growth has been fantastic, over 260% year over year.
Wow, okay. That's some serious growth. But what about profitability? Are they actually making money?
They are. And they've been consistently profitable, even with all the ups and downs in the crypto market.
That's impressive. But what about their debt? We've seen other companies in this space get into trouble by taking on too much debt.
Yeah, that's a good point. But HIVE is actually in a great position. Their debt-to-equity ratio is much lower than the industry average.
Oh, that's really good to hear. So they're being financially responsible.
They are, and they've prioritized investments in expanding their infrastructure, keeping their technology up to date. And they're holding a big chunk of their mine, Bitcoin, as a reserve.
So they're not just riding the wave, they're building for the future.
Exactly.
They really do seem to be ticking a lot of the right boxes.
Yeah.
But we've only just scratched the surface here. There's still a lot to consider.
Yeah, we need to look at the overall market sentiment, see what the analysts are saying about HIVE.
And their ownership structure.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the big players holding their stock?
And, of course, we need to do a full risk assessment. What are the potential threats and opportunities facing HIVE?
All right, so we talked about a lot of the positives for HIVE,
Huh?
but obviously every investment has its risks.
Right.
So let's look at some of the potential challenges they might face and also the opportunities, of course.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the overall market sentiment. What are the analysts saying about HIVE? Are investors generally bullish or bearish on the stock?
I'd say the sentiment is kind of cautiously optimistic. If you look at the analyst ratings, they average out to a moderate buy.
Okay, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. And their price target suggests there's still a lot of upside potential for the stock, but...
But there's always a but, right?
Right. There's a fairly high level of short interest in the stock.
Okay, explain that to me. What does that mean exactly?
It means some investors are betting against HIVE. They think the stock price is going to go down.
That's interesting. Why would anyone bet against a company that seems to be doing so well?
Well, some investors might be a little wary of HIVE's dependence on the Bitcoin market.
Because Bitcoin is so volatile.
Exactly. Even with their AI ventures, most of HIVE's revenue still comes from Bitcoin mining.
Gotcha.
So if the price of Bitcoin takes a sudden nosedive, it could definitely hurt their bottom line.
Yeah, even with those Bitcoin reserves we talked about.
Right. Crypto is known for its, shall we say, unpredictable nature.
That's one way to put it. Are there any other factors making investors a bit hesitant about HIVE?
Yeah. The regulatory landscape is another big one.
Right, governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to deal with cryptocurrency.
Exactly. And any new regulations, especially anything targeting energy use in mining, could really impact HIVE's operations.
That's a good point. But we talked about their focus on sustainability.
Right.
Or their use of renewable energy. Wouldn't that be an advantage for them if regulations get tougher?
It definitely could be. If regulations start to target mining operations that use a lot of energy, HIVE's green approach would make them look pretty good.
Yeah.
Like they're the responsible players in the industry. And it might even attract investors who are specifically looking for companies with strong ESG credentials.
Right. Okay, so they're ahead of the game there. But let's talk about the competitive landscape in the AI market for a minute.
Sure.
We briefly touched on those big cloud computing giants, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure. Can HIVE realistically compete with those behemoths?
It's a tough question. I mean, it's kind of a classic David versus Goliath situation.
Right.
HIVE is significantly smaller than those hyperscalers, but they do have a couple of advantages.
Okay, like what?
Well, we talked about how they were early adopters of those NVIDIA H100 chips.
Right.
And their focus on energy efficiency. Those things combined give them an edge when it comes to both cost and performance.
So they're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're focusing on being nimble and efficient and kind of carving out their own niche.
Exactly.
But what about actual market share? Can they really grab enough of the pie to make a real impact?
That's the big question. To really succeed, they need to secure some key partnerships.
Okay.
And they need to really prove the value of their specialized AI infrastructure.
So they need to show that what they offer is unique and valuable.
Right.
Well, it sounds like they're already making some progress there. Did they get a partnership with NVIDIA?
Oh, yeah, they did. NVIDIA actually designated them as a preferred cloud provider.
That's huge,
It
really.
is. It gives them access to some amazing resources and potential collaborations, things that could really help them go toe-to-toe with those bigger players.
So they're not backing down from the challenge.
Yep.
All right, good to know. Let's move on to HIVE's ownership structure. Who are the major shareholders? Is it mostly retail investors, or are there some big institutions involved?
There are definitely some big institutions in the mix.
Okay, good.
You've got names like Vanguard and BlackRock among their top holders.
Those are some heavy hitters.
They are. And that kind of strong institutional presence is usually a good sign. It signals confidence in the company's potential.
Yeah, those institutions tend to do their due diligence before making big investments. What about insider ownership? We know the CEO owns a good chunk of stock. Are other insiders buying or selling?
Well, there's been a fair amount of insider buying over the past year,
Okay,
and they've been buying at prices that were actually lower than the current market value.
so that's a good sign.
Yeah, it suggests that people who are really in the know, they see the stock as undervalued.
I like that. All right, let's wrap this up with a good old-fashioned SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What are HIVE's main strengths?
Well, their commitment to sustainability is definitely a major asset. That access to low-cost renewable energy, it gives
Okay.
them a real cost advantage. Like we talked about, it aligns them with that whole ESG movement.
Right.
And that's attracting more and more investors these days.
Okay, that's a solid strength. But what about their weaknesses? Where are they vulnerable?
Their size is a potential weakness. They're pretty small compared to those dominant players in cloud computing.
Yeah, true.
And they're still pretty reliant on Bitcoin mining for revenue. So they're exposed to that volatility we talked about.
Okay, so their biggest strength, that tie to Bitcoin, is also a potential weakness. That's a double-edged sword.
It is.
All right, so what about opportunities? What are some things HIVE could really capitalize on?
Well, the AI market is just exploding right now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And HIVE is in a perfect position to ride that wave. The demand for AI computing power is just skyrocketing, and their infrastructure, their early adoption of those powerful GPUs, it gives them a real head start.
Okay, so opportunities galore. But what about threats? What are the things that could really derail HIVE's plans?
Well, that regulatory uncertainty we talked about is a big one.
Yeah, that's a big question mark hanging over the entire crypto industry.
Right. Any crackdown on crypto mining, especially when it comes to energy use, could really hurt them, even with their green initiatives.
Okay.
And then there's the potential for supply chain disruptions.
Right.
Especially for those NVIDIA GPUs. Those are crucial for their operations. If there's a shortage, it could really slow them down.
So to sum it up, HIVE has a lot going for it. A really unique business model, strong leadership, solid financials, and they're in two really high-growth markets.
Yeah.
But they've also got some challenges to overcome, like that dependence on Bitcoin
Right.
and potential regulatory hurdles.
Right, and the competition from those really big players.
It's a pretty compelling story, but there are still some chapters to be written. But for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with all the ins and outs of value investing, what are the key takeaways here? What makes HIVE stand out as a potential investment?
I think that dual focus on Bitcoin mining and AI services is huge. They're in two markets that are poised for explosive growth, and they're not just dabbling, they're making serious investments in infrastructure. Securing those essential resources like those NVIDIA H100 GPUs.
Right, they're all in. And we talked a lot about their commitment to sustainability.
Yeah.
But, beyond the feel-good factor, how does that actually benefit investors?
Well, their use of green energy, it gives them that significant cost advantage, around 20% compared to their competitors.
Right, right.
And that translates directly to their bottom line. Plus, it makes them more attractive to investors who care about ESG factors. And they've gotten those great ratings from the ESG agencies, which really reinforces their credibility.
So they're doing good for the planet and doing good for their investors, but let's not sugarcoat things. There are risks here. The crypto market, as we said, is notoriously volatile, and HIVE's profitability is still tied to the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's definitely something investors need to be aware of. However, they are in a strong financial position. They've got that sizable Bitcoin treasury, and they're not carrying a lot of debt. That gives them a cushion if the market takes a downturn. They're not immune, but they're better prepared than a lot of companies to ride out the storm.
And how about the regulatory landscape? That's still a big unknown for the whole crypto world. Could that pose a threat to HIVE's operations?
It could, but I think their proactive approach to sustainability and transparency will help them. They're really setting a standard for responsible mining practices, and that could actually influence how regulations evolve in the future.
So they're not just reacting, they're trying to shape the conversation. I like that. But what about their long-term prospects in the AI market? Can they really hold their own against those tech giants?
Well, the AI market is only going to get bigger. It's projected to grow exponentially. And HIVE is already positioned as a key player in providing that computational power that AI needs. If AI really is the future and HIVE is providing the infrastructure to make it happen, I think this could be a very rewarding investment.
Okay, that's a bold statement. But you've made a pretty compelling case for HIVE. So bottom line, should our listeners be adding HIVE to their portfolios?
You know, we always encourage everyone to do their own research and think about your own personal risk tolerance. Investing in any stock, there's always risk involved. But based on what we've seen, HIV has the potential for significant growth over the long term, and they have a lot of the hallmarks of a solid investment.
So definitely a company worth keeping an eye on. And if you want to really dive into the details, we've got those full reports linked in the episode description.
Yeah, definitely check those out. And don't forget to subscribe to our Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We've got a ton of other deep dives on companies just like HIVE.
We do. And let us know in the comments what stocks you want us to analyze next. We love hearing your suggestions.
We do.
And one last thing, everyone.
Yeah.
This was for informational purposes only. It's not financial advice.
Right. Always talk to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into HIVE Digital Technologies. Until next time, happy investing.